So we are going to come into a kind of tabletop position that with the hands directly underneath the shoulders and the knees underneath the hips. So firstly, we're going to talk a little bit about the tendency we have to let that anterior tilt come in, and we just let that sort of transverse abdominis lets go, and we have not got any real structure to our core. So if I was to do, let's say, a traditional plank, and straighten out my hips, my legs, and if I kept my day-to-day posture, you could see there was that big dip in my back. Now, I'm not really feeling a massive amount of activation here in my lower abdominals, and that's because that anterior tilt has switched off the TVA, the transverse abdominis, which I'll keep mentioning, which is the deepest layer of abdominal tissue. So, let me just talk quickly about the TVA because I realise I haven't yet. So the TVA, transverse abdominis, is kind of like a corset. So it attaches to the lower ribs and also to the top of the pelvis, or kind of the inside of the pelvis. And when you look at it on a sort of anatomy picture, it does look a little bit like a corset. It wraps around, and if you place your thumb on the very bottom rib and your little finger on the top of your hip, and you were to bring those 2 points together, so kind of like let your body go, you'll feel that those would get closer together. But if you are to lengthen your spine and think about holding your core activated, so squeeze your belly button in, you'll notice those 2 points get further away. So that means that transverse abdominis, that corset muscle, is activated when we're in an upright position. So when we're in a good postural position with a nice extension in the lumbar spine, its job is to stabilise in that position. So if we're always relaxed and kind of crushing that area, that TVA is not going to be activated. It's going to have to let go in order for us to get into that position. So we want to switch it back on, fire it back up and get it working. So this plank is going to be really good for getting that going. So we're going to have the hands directly underneath the shoulders. Really be mindful not to let the hands come too far forwards or let the shoulders come too far forwards. Really make sure we've got a nice stacking of those joints, so wrist over under shoulder. We're going to have the hips directly underneath the knees, directly underneath the hips. And the first part of this, we're going to keep the knees down. We're just going to have a look at this posture here, and we're going to correct anything that might be off. We want to get a nice neutral spine, so we want to get a nice flat back in this tabletop position. So hopefully you can see, hopefully I'm doing a good job right now of demonstrating, and I'll have a nice straight line in my back. There'll be no arches or dips or anything like that. So let's just talk through some of the most common. So most common, I've already mentioned, would be the anterior tilt. So we're going to, in order to correct that, we're going to do two things. We're going to squeeze the belly button in, and we're going to posteriorly tilt the pelvis. We don't want to overly posteriorly tilt. You might find that that's you, in which case you'll have this posture. So you're going to have that arch in the back, and that kind of like tucking under of the butt. So in order to correct that, you're actually going to do the reverse. You're going to anteriorly tilt the pelvis. So you're going to kind of stick your butt out and bring that into a nice alignment. So that's the pelvis. There's really only those two things that we mostly see, either exaggerated anterior or an exaggerated posterior. So the other area that we want to correct, we might need to correct, would be the back, the in between the shoulder blades. Now, if I give myself kind of a rounded back and a sort of dysfunctional day-to-day, I've been slouching at a desk, I've been looking at my phone on the way home, then we'll see that compression of the rib cage and that rounding of the back. And you can see now I've got that real arch in my upper back. Now to correct that is quite tricky. There are two things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is think about the sternum. And we want to bring, I mentioned the torchlight in the back activation video. We want to think about that torchlight. Instead of it pointing down towards my knees, if I'm in this bad posture, you can imagine I had a torchlight on my sternum, it'd be pointing down towards my knees. I want to bring that light in between my hands. And immediately you can see that I've corrected that a little bit. Now you might still find that you have a bit of a rounded shoulder even when you do that. And that might feel quite tight into the upper traps and kind of neck area. So the other thing you need to do is open your rib cage. Now, this is quite difficult to think about. What we're going to think is we're going to imagine that we had a band around kind of where your bra sits, your sports bra sits. So imagine that band around your sports bra was made of paper, so it's like a paper tape measure that you get at IKEA. You'd place that round and you stuck it so it was around your ribs. What you're going to do is you're going to try and break that paper tape measure. The way you're going to do that is you're going to expand your rib cage out. The first point for you, can't do this with a rounded back with your torchlight pointing down. You've got to bring your torchlight up. When I brought my torchlight up, I'm going to bring my arms out so you can see, I can now fill my diaphragm with a lot more air. And I can expand, hopefully you can see that, my rib cage out. I do this facing you this way, so I've got my hands on mine. You should be able to see that my hands are coming slightly further apart. Now it's not a massive amount, but what that's going to do is just expand your rib cage and it's going to open your chest, and that's going to help flatten your back in between your shoulder blades in your plank. So we're going to bring the torchlight up between the hands, and then we're going to expand the rib cage. Now you should see, if I combine that with my posterior tilt and my squeezing in my belly button, you should see now there's a nice flat back. However, where you can see something that looks very easy, I'm working really hard right now. I can feel my core working, my mid-traps all across my back is working. I'm really feeling that kind of activation of all these muscle groups around the back and in my abdomen as well, my belly button. My t-shirt's falling down, but you can see there with me squeezing my belly button in that I get, instead of having a nice little belly hanging down there, as soon as I activate, you can see all of that tighten up. And I'm not squeezing my belly button in so I'm trying to make myself skinny or anything like that. I'm just activating those muscles there. Once we manage to get a little bit of control over that back, and it will take you a few goes, you probably won't find this first time, you'll probably struggle with this a little bit. Take your time with it. Once you've got that nice flat back, then what we're going to do is we're just going to lift the knees.